Welcome to the Jeff and Alex podcast. I am Jeff Hillemeyer, and with my friend Alex Gonzalez, we explore topics that help you be your best self. And we also get to chat with some great guests. So join us now on the Jeff and Alex podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeff and Alex podcast. I'm Alex Gonzalez, and I'm here with Jeff Hillemeyer. How you doing, Jeff?
Good. Hey, I got a comment. I love that shirt.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
You like that? And I can engage? Yeah. That's
Yep. You add a U in there, and it'll feel real comfortable to me.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you can take credit for both. Forget about what Blake and Daly and all of them are doing with Engage
Right.
Ventures. We'll give you full credit.
Right. Just as important.
But I don't
relevant.
I don't have your Engage shirt.
No, not many do.
It's a rare edition.
It's a collector's item at this point.
So how you doing there? You're pretty good. I was gonna say, how are you doing? You're in your in-town world headquarters right now.
Yeah, sure am. Yep. And you can see the Spun Logic sign. Again, no Engage sign, but yeah, it feels like home. Yes, it is.
Well, that's good. Well, likewise here, and I've been doing well, and like you, been doing the work of building ecosystems and innovation and all that, and doing lots of interviews as well too, just like you are.
Yeah, and you know what? I loved your interview with Jay Bailey. It was fantastic. He's somebody that you introduced me to, who I got to know a little bit, but listening to his story was really, really great. How did you come to meet Jay?
Yeah, it's with the work at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and of course, there's focus on growing the innovation ecosystem, period, and the innovation community, which includes a lot of the folks like Jay who drive, accelerate entrepreneurs. But in addition, this focus on inclusive innovation and how, we may have to talk about it before on the show, but if not, less than 10% of at least venture-backed entrepreneurs are Black, Latino, or woman. And of course, what Jay's doing, so we met in the course of doing all that work as he started launching Russell Center not that long ago, Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, for those who have not heard about it. And, his focus is to really have this center right there, on near Northside Drive and Far Street, near the HBCUs, to drive Black economic empowerment and particularly grow Black entrepreneurs, whether they're going to be the next, unicorn, or whether it's going to be, a Main Street business.
Mm-hmm.
It just drive really well. So he's an inspiring guy, and what I love about the Disruptor Studio show with him is not only does it tell a little bit of that story, but his story is pretty amazing as well too.
Yeah, his story is so inspiring, and it's really unique because he sort of would tell he came from a tough place, had tremendous success, and then went all the way back down to, I think he said he was experiencing homelessness for a bit, and then sort of rose again, and it was very uplifting. But there's so many lessons in that. I think everybody should go listen to that, and I love that you've pivoted or added to the Disruptor Studio platform to include podcasts. So now everybody can hear that. Like, having Jay at the actual in-studio video would be awesome. But again, 100 people can see it. But Jay's story needs to be told. So I love that format.
Yeah, no, it worked out, and it was really, and look, it's always fun when you get to talk to, I consider Jay a friend as well too. And so it's always great when you get to talk to somebody like that, and it's interesting as well as I've gotten to, and it's not like we see each other every day, but as well I've gotten to know Jay, spending that hour just he and I, and this just as you know, Jeff, the medium of podcasting becomes very intimate, very fast. It's one-to-one, and I learned so much about him, and I had so much respect for him going into it, and then a magnitude of respect going out of it. And he's such a passionate storyteller. People want to follow him. But yeah, his personal story, you could see, because he is really someone who helps people achieve their dreams.
Hmm.
And more importantly, helps people achieve their dreams when they believe that that dream is, they don't even know they have that dream. They think it's impossible.
Yeah.
And he's so sincere and authentic about it, which is a big theme on Disruptor Studio, the authenticity of the folks who are those leaders who are on it. And it makes sense when you hear his story about how his passion on entrepreneurism. But you're right. Him going into some personal pain really made him that much more stronger. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I would encourage it. Yeah, available wherever you listen to your podcast platforms at Disruptor Studio. But yeah, no, thanks for that. That was it was a good conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great. Let me ask you one question. As you've had the opportunity to talk to, work with so many amazing leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just take Jay. Let's take Kat Cole, Ben Chestnut. Is there, because this is something that I'm doing on my podcast. I'm trying to get into the origin story of some of these people.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, Ben talking about, he didn't grow up in wealth, and
Right.
um, I- is there like a thread or a common theme or thread that goes through some of these people that you see in their backgrounds? Because you do a great job of diving deep into, how they were raised, how they made their way. Are there some common threads that have led to them doing great things, whether it's building huge businesses, social change, whatever it is?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wouldn't want to say that it's, I would say disproportionately. I guess quite a few of them have come back from a background that was not, privileged, right? So
Hmm.
I've had quite a few. So I don't know if it's a consistent pattern, but definitely I think. And look, when I was a G, as I mentioned, during their heyday, and I remember the head of executive development, this is many years ago, at the time said some of their best executives are people who came from environments that were humble.
Hmm.
And so there's some element to that. So I think so. There is some elements of that, but there's some folks we've had on there who came from either middle class
Sure.
backgrounds or maybe affluent backgrounds. I think the consistent pattern is some level of authenticity and some level of passion that comes. And there's some event that happens, whether it's falling in love with what they're doing, or whether it's something that happened in their youth that kind of inspired to do so, or whether it's something that made them want to pursue something else. That I think is a pattern more than anything else.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, all that authenticity and passion reign through in all of them.
Yeah, and I would say, again, I think you build authenticity, but that is really the element of it. So even those who came from a background and say, hey, they were comfortable growing up, to those who were scraping by or homeless or whatever, somehow that authenticity, and they are truly themselves. I mean, whenever you talk to
Hmm.
them, there's not a facade. When you talk to Ben or Ford Fry or Aaron or anybody or Tristan Walker, there's not a facade about them. They are who they are. And I think all their life experiences and where they are now and their confidence lets them be able to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love that. So, um, I got to know, because I see you doing so many different things.
Okay.
You've got a big role with the chamber. You're obviously running Disruptor Studio. You're a part of the Jeff and Alex podcast, which is just blowing up.
Yeah,
you've got
exactly.
you've got the family. You're producing a ton of great content as well. And this is a topic that I'm so obsessed with, as you know. But what is your take on, let's call it, productivity? How do you juggle the things that you're juggling? How do you prioritize focus? What's your strategy?
I'm all about just rolling out of bed and just, what do I feel like doing today?
what?
No, it's funny. Well, and look, I want to get your perspective because I know you're a productivity junkie, your productivity geek, in terms of what you do, particularly from a tools perspective. For me, it's about being deliberate. Well, I guess two things. One is even beyond the tools is being passionate about what you do, which of course is a privilege more so than anything else. So when you do what you're passionate about, it actually leads to sometimes some counterproductive measures because you and I've talked about this before. When you love what you're doing, you end up becoming a workaholic
Yeah.
and having to create boundaries sometime for your work. But to me, I would say at the highest level, to me, it's about being deliberate about time. And I remember hearing early on, kind of as I started becoming an executive or whatever in my career, is hearing from some folks saying, look, you need to say what's most important and how do you dedicate time to it. And so like when you're running a big organization, I need to spend 30% of my time on talent management. I need to spend, 20% of my time on operational reviews, 30% of my time with customers and blah, blah, and so on and so forth. And then work in a calendar that adheres to that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you make a decision, is that 60 hours a week, whatever it is. And so I would say that the kind of the highest level, being deliberate about how you want to use your time, which means you have to say no to stuff. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of my first trick. How about
Yeah.
you?
And
I
I
mean,
was
is
going to
that,
say that
yeah.
saying no is like, it's really hard. But it's probably the best discipline if you really want to achieve something exceptional. Like that's where I go back to, like, if you're trying to do something difficult, exceptional, something great, or that you perceive to be tough or difficult, you have to focus. You have to be willing to say no to things, certainly to offers or things that come your way, but also distractions and things that pull you away from that. And so the way that I like to think about, sort of at a high level, is what are the key areas of my life that will help me go toward my
Mm-hmm.
purpose, right? And so my purpose being to have an outsized positive impact on the world. And I look at that through three lenses: family, Dragon Army, and doing good. And then, when those circles can overlap, that's when it's a win.
Yeah.
But when something falls outside of those, it's really hard for me to say yes to, or I need to be disciplined to say no to it. So it's sort of like you're saying, like, if you're passionate about something and you're focused, it does start to create a lens of, where should I be spending my time?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, putting a discipline and also checking yourself on it. And it could be as simple as looking at your calendar and,
Yeah,
how do I, yeah, and, just take inventory in time and where those time leaks are and where it is. And by the way, I think part of that also being able to depart from perfection sometimes. So if you
100%.
have certain elements, and it's not, you can spend so much time on a certain thing. You got to understand what is the relative risk that there could be, an email or document you're working on or whatever, and it may not be perfect. You say, oh, I wish it had this, 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 and this, but it might be okay to go because you gotta, because if it's all of a sudden taking 30% of your time and it was only supposed to be 5%, you got to
Yeah,
understand the departure point. But yeah, but this is where you got to have perspective how you want to spend your time. And for someone who's working in an environment where maybe someone could say, hey, I don't have control. I don't know if I'm, working in what I'm passionate about, but you still need to be productive, or, of course, it's a whole different conversation. But I think so. Then it's like, what are the 4 or 5 things you at the highest level have to do to be successful in your job and in
yeah,
your life, and how do you allocate that time?
yeah,
Which, by the way, includes stuff outside of work too, because I think you could be unproductive outside of work as well. And if how disciplined are you about spending time with your family? Whatever's important to you, that's how I think you have to structure a world, and that's a starting point.
yeah. And I think as your calendar point is spot on. When I talk about or write about color coding my calendar, it's a pretty simple thing, but taking like Google Calendar and identifying different colors for different types of activities. So, for
Hmm.
instance, doing good is pink on my calendar, so I can look at my week or month at any given point and see, is there enough pink? Some weeks there's too much pink,
Right.
and so that that sort of eye level view can help you focus your time and really sort of say, almost take stock in, am I doing the right things? Because you can get lost in the minutia of everything coming at you, and if you're not isolating out the things that are really important to you, you can lose sight of it.
Yeah, and to that kind of, we talked a little bit about this kind of I mean, there's a kind of strategic element of, how do you manage your time, which to be honest with you, you have to get that right. And, there's a colleague of mine, she was a head of HR at Equifax for many years. Her name's Caretha Rushing, and she had a saying, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So you could have the best
Yes.
tech, around you, but but if you don't have the the inputs into it, the use of it, the intent of it isn't right. And I think that applies to productivity as well too. So you could have the greatest productivity tools, and if you
Yes.
don't strategically use it right, it doesn't matter. That being said, though, and I know with you in particular, I'd love to get your perspective. What do you use from a kind
Yeah.
of, what are your productivity hacks from that perspective?
I'm a bit obsessed with productivity tools and processes, um, to the point where it's a problem. Like I'm
That's making you
quick
unproductive.
sometimes.
What's your color for researching, productivity
Right,
tools?
right. There should be a color.
To be
Um,
red.
so here's something interesting about me, and actually, I've as I've shared this with people, I've heard that it's similar for others. But like, all right, so if I said next week I need to be as productive as possible, I need to check off as many tasks as I can for whatever reason. Next week's the week. If I switched to a new task management tool, say over this weekend, I
Mm.
would crush next week. Moving to a new tool, it's weird. Like I get excited about it. I get pumped about checking off the items. Um, there is something to the idea though of when you move to a new system, having to rewrite and go back in your list and go, oh man, this thing's been on my to-do list for
Right.
3 months. It's obviously not important, right? So there's a cleansing that can happen from that process.
I'm just
So
wondering because I have you been in our project management site for our show lately? I don't think you have been since we started it.
in
Trello.
Trello,
I'm just no,
that's because
it's a
that's
reconciliation
what,
here.
yeah. So we've been using Trello to manage our show. And over the last week, I have fallen in love with something called Notion.
Oh
Uh,
man.
it's
See,
like
everybody, I'm learning about Jeff. We've known each other for a decade and still learning about Jeff. And here we go. So apparently I'm going to be on a new tool every week. So
I'm I'm scared to say probably. I'm going to try to convince you to move over to it. Um, yeah, but yes, that's part of the problem. Although I will say, just for a second on Notion, and I'm a week into it, but I've heard about it for quite some time now. It is it really seems to be like a great combination of task management, project management, Trello type features, calendaring. It's pretty great as like an overall dashboard, and like managing a project like the Jeff and Alex podcast would actually be really great there, instead of what we have. As you know, we have uh, Dropbox, we have Trello, we do some Google Drive for creating the show note. Like we have all these tools.
yeah.
Presumably, you can do almost all of that within Notion, and we can see it all at the same time. So, anyways, I digress. But it gets me pumped up to think about a new tool and getting it all set up. So, I've spent a lot of time over the last week on that.
Now, do you know from a calendar standpoint, what's your kind of, is there a calendar that you're more efficient on, which is, it seems odd, but it's becoming a real,
Mm-hmm.
thing, particularly in this world where people, now, this is where, of course, to.to here in Atlanta with Calendly has done an amazing thing in terms of calendar management, for
Yes.
scheduling, which helps one dimension. But in terms of calendaring,
Mm-hmm.
do you have a process or technique in how you manage? I
Well,
guess
and
you mentioned color coding, but
yeah, well, and just on Calendly, I mean, talk about a business that's doing incredibly well during COVID. I mean,
oh yeah.
so there's some businesses that really are needed more during a time like this. Yeah, no, I prefer Google Calendar with all the functions that come along with it. But I will say, and certainly color coding, but I use my iPad Pro quite a bit to work, and the Apple loves to make
Mhm.
their own products work better in their own system. So unfortunately, for the first time in a long time, I'm actually using Google or Apple's calendar app too.
So behind the curtains, everyone, as we start working together, you know, I'm an Apple guy pretty much.
Yeah.
And not that Jeff isn't, but but
Oh
we
yeah, I'm on a
started
Mac.
seeing,
Yeah.
but we started realizing he's like, I've not received your invitation, and which I'm still
Hmm.
convinced he has me on auto decline for part of his efficiency hack.
But like Apple's calendar doesn't let you color code
Yeah.
the way that I'm talking about. Yeah, you can't do it in Apple Calendar. So like there's just some stuff I'm like, man, if they just had this one thing. Or for instance, I use Gmail, and one of the things I love about Gmail, talking about productivity, is the ability to snooze an email. I don't know if you use that feature in email, do you?
No, I've not actually. I've not used that.
Yeah, so basically like let's say that I send you an email about, let's say we're going to record this coming Saturday, and I send you an email with a bunch of thoughts on stuff I'd love to talk about. That email today may not be relevant, but you can snooze it to pop back up in your inbox on Saturday morning
Oh,
or Friday to review. So you can basically take things out of your inbox, but they pop back up at the right time. But Apple Mail doesn't have that feature. So there's there's things that I like in different platforms, but Google's usually have the nerdier things like that allow
yeah.
me to be more productive.
Which, kind of when you think of the ethos of Apple and Google. Google's being more of the, the engineering driven company, and
Yeah,
Apple being the more design company. So it'll be beautiful in Apple though. It'll be
that's right.
beautiful in Apple, but
100%.
now I find, I think, kind of going to this, there's elements again of the tools, which there's so many, because you also mentioned the other element, there's project management. Like I'm a visual person.
Mm,
And one thing I missed during this kind of COVID element from not having, a normal, all the apertures of a normal office environment is frankly whiteboards
yeah.
and flip charts and sticky notes. And so my chaos is actually my organization, because to me, it's like sometimes getting stuff in this digital box here does not process well with my brain. So getting it to spread out and seeing it listed out, and there's that, and being able to kind of visually move stuff around is important. Which, by the way, is why I kind of like that, Trello
Yeah.
somewhat from project management, because it's kind of simulating that as well too. But I think, but I think it goes back, a lot of it too is staying disciplined. And also I think another productivity hack for me is which could be counterintuitive, is also creating space to breathe and think as well. We talked a little bit
Mhm.
about in the prior show about, needing that just to be more passionate and empowered and creative. But I think that's important for productivity, because, and especially in this world now where you're in these 12-hour Zoom days, you got to have
Yeah.
some space. And even before this, there's nothing worse than, being 6 p.m. and you're like, I have not had 2 minutes. And so it's a tough discipline to have, because people want so much of your time.
Yeah.
But creating that space to think, email, social media, whatever it is important.
How are you keeping track? Like what do you use for a to-do system as an example? Like where you keep it? Is it just a list you write down? Like I got to get this done. Keep it in your head. Do you have
Yeah,
post-its?
yeah. Well, I try to put it. I have a list down, but actually I use, as simple as it is, the task features, that's integrated across, with my iPhone and all that, and all my tech. And again, it's tricky too, because I, use, Apple at home. From an Office standpoint, it's on a Microsoft platform, so it's still a little bit of all that element. But I use really a task, and trying to be more disciplined about, what are the dates, being realistic, and when does it have to happen. But
So, but
that's but it's basically a to-do list for me.
yeah, but you have Microsoft at home?
No, from a Office standpoint, it's
Oh,
Microsoft.
got
Yeah.
it. You
But
mean yeah,
because the iPhone, you're connected with the whole time,
I see.
and and even when I do writing and things like that, even if it's, sometimes I'll do it on my Mac and send it to, or
Hmm.
Microsoft product or whatever, the Surface, just because I like the Apple products better. But
Yeah, but
not
see,
much
like
of a
that's an
productivity
example.
issue, but more of an efficient. But just for me, it helps me work more efficiently, because I know where everything's at.
You're right, right. That's part of my problem though of the being really into productivity and tools and things like that makes it hard for me to use Apple's tools for those things because they don't work on non-Apple products,
Yeah,
which just really bugs me. Like there's definitely things that I really like that Apple builds, but like a great example, Apple Podcasts, like it's
yeah.
definitely the best podcast app, which they're all pretty simple, but it's the best. It only works on Apple devices, and so my phone's Android. So, your Surface example, like
Yeah.
I would try, I'm personally trying not to use tools that don't work across any
Yeah.
platform. So tomorrow I need to jump onto something, boom, I've got access. So that versus like the design of it or the simplicity of it that just works with Apple products. That's a fantastic thing about Apple. But like contacts, like I will never have Apple contacts, iCloud contacts be my main contact hub because it just doesn't work on anything non-Apple, right? So I use Google, which can go across all of them. So um, it's just it's your point. It's the difference between Google and Apple. The
Yeah.
design aesthetics, like the devices, the laptop, the iPad, fantastic from an Apple perspective.
Yeah, and it's interesting because my, kids that are college when it's out, but especially the one about to go in, he's finding all these productivity tools for them, from task management to reminders to elements to actually quiet your technology during certain times, to that are agnostic of platform, which I think is some good and important. And for me, I think I'm all about simplicity, and even though I like to say it was a tech driven and tech enabled, the integration of across platforms I think is important for me. But I've noticed particularly with my son's about to go into school, it's a finding a lot of these, they're not hacks. These are, whether they're plugins or whatever, to go into Chrome or whatever, to really simplify. And I love Element because look, I think there's a productivity hack we should talk about here, or productivity aspect is social media and news and this whole onlineness of the world is a time suck.
Yeah, big time.
And having something to force all that down, because I think right now it's so easy, even emails, you feel like you got to be constantly on it, or you see notifications. I've shut down, particularly during as COVID started going, all my notifications, news notifications, except for I forgot major alerts or something on my phone and my computer, because I realized I was getting drawn into every single thing that was coming in. So now I'm like, I'm going to force myself when I want that
Mm-hmm.
stuff versus having these constant distractions coming at me.
Are you inbox zero?
Nah, no,
Do
that's,
you no?
there's always an idea out there that I want to,
Uh, so
No, I
you,
mean,
how
look,
many?
I definitely try to, by the end of the week, try to make sure to get through them. And so, but yeah, I'm not, I'm sure you're an inbox zero guy.
I try to be. Let's do this real quick. It's
Oh
early in the
boy.
morning when we're recording this. Um, how many emails are in your inbox right now?
Hold on, let me look at my integrated email box.
Yeah,
Oh, you're not going to like it. 111 unread.
111 unread, but how many in there?
Oh, geez. I have no idea.
So is it
Um,
like thousands?
oh, yeah, yeah. Here's the thing. What I'm bad about, and this might be a little bit of coming from public companies and all that, where there are so many retention rules on what you can delete or not for compliance reasons, that I've been conditioned, right or wrong, to not delete a lot of stuff, because there's so many rules. Well, don't delete this, don't
Sure,
do, you
right.
can't do that. That also, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna let the system auto delete it. Now here's the problem. I'm no longer
Yeah,
for my personal stuff, there's not an auto delete thing. So I need to go
right.
in and start doing that. But it used to be where, like, I knew that after 90 days and they would follow the archive policy. But so yeah, that's that's hurting me there.
Yeah.
But
So I've got 16 in my inbox. I think five of which came in since we've been on this. So
yeah.
and probably most of the rest overnight. So yeah, I definitely try to keep it down to zero when I can, but if not, just a handful. Yeah. But I
What
use archive, which in Gmail you can search archive just as easily. So it just moves that out of the inbox.
now? What's kind of your email clearing process? Is it as soon as it comes in, you try to get to it? Do you have a certain time you allocate?
No, I'm really bad about constantly looking at email. It's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's bad. Now, I will tell you, things are over the last couple of years when Dragon Army moved to Slack. I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years ago. my email clutter went. I mean, I get almost zero emails from Dragon Army internally. It's almost
Yeah.
all Slack. So that took,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like 80% of my email went away. But no, I'm terrible about it. I'm constantly checking email, responding to things. I'm conditioned that way because with growing your own business and especially an agency type business, you're always waiting for a yes from a client that you've
True.
been
That,
pitching or
yeah.
something. So like that's so exciting. It's like,
Yeah.
if today I know I'm gonna be constantly checking because that could be a make or break type thing. Uh, so anyways, yeah, I'm bad about that.
Yeah, and that's part of me for managing that is also trying to be good at designating, which emails come to the top. I mean, that is one thing I have used, like, these names I need to know, so they're going to
Right.
kind of go into the higher, and it's difficult. And this is where I think people need to know that you could be disciplined but empathetic at the same time. And so, I think for me, as we both talk about, you have to say no more to stuff.
Yep.
Um, but also being empathetic about it as well too. I mean, I
Hmm.
think there's a strategy that you fit in. You get asked for whatever speaking engagements, going to certain meetings. And the other thing too is, depending where you are in your career, I think the most productive thing is how you use your teams as well. And
Yeah.
tell you, one of the biggest, when I was at GE years and years and years and years ago, going on to the early on to kind of a management training thing where they took you away to Crotonville, New York for 3 weeks for training. And, you're talking about 60-hour, weeks,
Yeah.
easy, in your roles. And they take you and they warn you and said, look, you're going to have full schedules. And, of course, your first inclination is when you're in the, kind of corporate training center there, so you spend literally 3 weeks straight there, is that you're trying to do both your day job and then the training. And then you come to a point where you realize you can't. But then you started trusting your teams to do certain things. You realize, wow, this stuff is kind of resolving itself. That to me was
Hmm.
one of the biggest lessons kind of
Yep.
early on in my career is, and you also learned about some of your people who could not,
That's
so
right.
there's a little bit of that, but it also kind of created this bias of delegation, which I think particularly when you start getting into executive function or management function is so critical. Um, and then understanding what you want to hold on. What's the most thing, hopefully you get people around you that are smarter than you, but then what's the X factor you bring to certain equations? And that's what you bring
Hmm.
to it, and let other things just happen. And imagine running organizations too. I think you have a good team around you that's handling a lot of this stuff and you're not necessarily micromanaging it. That has to be a huge productivity gain for you.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, being able to delegate, and to your point, not jumping in to solve every problem. Sometimes people can figure it out themselves, and stuff will naturally. So you're right. All those things are important. And as you think about how am I going to spend my time, what am I going to spend my time on, what's going to move the ball forward the most. That's the biggest trick.
And one thing before we kind of go is one thing that I know that since I've met you, you've been disciplined on, or you believe is a huge productivity gain, is also this early mornings. And I know I mean, you like to get up early, and I mean, just talk a little bit about that because I think
Hmm.
and I've been trying
Yeah.
to adopt more of that as well too. I'm a natural night owl, but
Yeah.
how does the mornings kind of work with you?
Yeah. I've always been wired for mornings, and I always feel most productive in the mornings. As the day goes on, and I've, been my mind's been jumping on different things. I feel like I'm a bit worn out by the end of the day, but I love getting up early when everything's quiet and knocking stuff out, so that by the time I have my first meeting at 8 or 9, I feel like I've accomplished quite a bit. It really fuels me, and I'll tell you, like in the morning, if I knock my email down to zero, and or let's say I put out a blog post or podcast, I I feel charged up for the day. Like doing something really productive in the morning really helps me go. I will say on my podcast, as I've talked to people who I think have accomplished great things and have this great purpose in their life, honestly, more often than not, they're night owls like you. They're not morning people, which always surprises
Really?
me every time somebody's not, because I'm like, wow, these people are crushing it like you, like getting all this stuff done at a high level, and yet they sleep later, which is just baffles me. It just is
Although,
crazy to
it's
me.
funny you say that, because I seem to find a pattern around early morning, early risers, particularly around kind of executive management, at getting up early. And
Huh.
so it's interesting. We should probably compare, is it
All
an
right,
age thing? Is it,
here's a thought. Here's a thought. A difference that we've learned on this today
yeah,
is between the two of us is that I'm way more like OCD about email and productivity
yeah,
and organization around tools and all that. And I get up early. I wonder if that's something that we find over time as we talk to people, like being more comfortable with the chaos a little bit, like you, like visual maybe more versus I got to
yeah,
be straight lines and corners and stuff,
yeah.
but I got to get up early. I wonder if that's something we find.
It could be, and I think there's also accepting that. I think your organization is going to be different from my organization as well, too, right? In terms of
Hmm.
particular productivity hacks
Yeah.
as well. I think that's different people have different elements, and also how you use your time could be different as well. Because here's the truth too. At 10 o'clock at night, it's not. I would not say is the best time for emails and things of that sort for me. It might be some of the best time to do some writing. It might be the same
Yeah.
time to do some sort of creating. But the mornings, I 100% agree with you. That is a time to crank out, emails and get productive and kind of, kind of dealing with the kind of organizational stuff, especially in terms of kind of your core job. So I think there's elements as well too.
I
And
wonder.
look, we also have to admit both of us are a little bit of workaholics as well too. So I think
Yeah.
this productivity hack is really about
But that's
is
because for us, work is in italics.
yeah,
It's
exactly true.
we love what we do, right? I will say one other thing that now as we talk about this may be occurring to me is like, because I have been an entrepreneur, always, never worked at a real job other than like in high school and stuff. Um, I've always had to decide and figure out what I'd be doing at every minute of every
Mm,
day. No one else ever told me, this is what you're doing today. This is the meeting you have to go to today. And so I do wonder if because of that, as a 21-year-old starting my first company, I had to get organized and because it was up to me if I didn't
yeah, you're
do it
right.
right. I wonder if that's a thing too,
I think you're probably right. I
where it's
think
made me
as you
more
also
anal about it. Yeah.
get more senior, though, it becomes more important, because the more senior you get, the more freedom you have. There's
Yeah,
certain
for
things
sure.
like, and even as an entrepreneur, right? You have certain investor meetings, certain things you got to respond to, no matter what. And I think even in the corporate world that happens. And as you get more senior, though, you got to figure out how to fill the
Yeah.
day. And this is where I learned this element: how am I going to spend percentages of my time?
Mm,
Because I remember going in a sales call, or from one of my first kind of, when I was running a business unit, kind of being president of division, and being asked on a sales call, and the salespeople organize this. It is up in the Northeast, and there's like these massive gaps of time between customer visits, and I'm
yeah.
like, and then I'm thinking about, there is about 100 things on my to-do list, and they just want to kind of, and the connectivity I get. But that's when I realized, oh wow, okay, I need to, if I let the time, because you kind of want to, as a leader, you want to be available for your
Yeah.
teams. Hey, this is your 2 days. So it
That's
kind
right.
of taught me then. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to give them structure what this means. This is your 2 days, but this is what I expect. I need
Yep.
to see 10 customers over the course of these 2 days. I want to see, may I have a town hall and do this. Because the thing is, though, I think there's always going to be a demand on your time. Always going to be a
Mhm.
demand on your time. There's always something that's going to happen. If you don't put structure around that, it's just going to, get away
Yep.
from you.
And maybe we can end on this story. I think it was Jack Dorsey was speaking at a conference years. I mean, it could have been 10 years ago, but basically he said that when he first became, CEO and his company was growing, um, he thought that the calendar of a successful CEO was boom all the way through, like
Right.
locked, just busy, like that. He thought early, like that shows that I'm crushing it. And I got to tell you, I was definitely that way for a long time. Like I would feel complete if my week looked just boom back to back because I in my mind I was being productive. And he said, as you become more and more of a leader, you have to have big gaps in your schedule because you
Yeah.
don't know what your company will need from you during the week, what will come up, your team, what problem you'll need to help solve. And so he very specifically now looks at his calendar and says, do I have gaps to make sure that I have the ability to adjust and react? And I've ever since then, I've tried to tailor my calendar that way.
100% agree. And yeah, the time will get used and sometimes even more
Right.
productively, but absolutely too. But, think, if you do what you love, you're always, and it's almost become somewhat more of a challenge as well too, sometimes, for being disciplined, but I agree. Well, good, Jeff. Well, definitely, if anything, we've learned that, some, that I'm going to be on a new, project management platform for our show next week, probably.
Yeah, you
So
will.
that's good to know. But anyways, good. Well, this is great. I know I have a ton of respect in terms of what you do from a productivity perspective, because and I know if you follow Jeff's particularly his blog, he'll talk about some specific technology as well too, including when he's frustrated about it. So make sure you you follow. But yeah, so this is great, Jeff, and make sure you also follow us on social media, make some comments, maybe talk about what some of your favorite productivity hacks are, or productivity processes are in the comments below. So Jeff, good seeing you again.
Yeah, you too, Alex.
All right, thanks everybody. Make sure you follow us and subscribe, and thank you for seeing us here on the Jeff and Alex podcast.
Bye, everybody.